Hello and welcome to another episode of this Brian De Palma scene by scene journey. And this episode I am super excited for because this is a movie I didn't think I'd be as excited to talk about, but I'm glad we're talking about it. And I'm bringing on my friend and fellow podcaster, Sicco. Sicco, welcome.
Well, thank you, Craig. And thank you for letting me talk about Carrie, because I
Yeah.
love Carrie.
So yes, we're going to be talking today about Brian De Palma's ninth film, 1976's Carrie, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of two films that were directed by Brian De Palma in 1976. So a
Mm-hmm.
busy year for him, based of course on the novel by Stephen King. I believe it's Stephen King's debut novel.
It is. Yeah.
The more I watch Brian De Palma films and the more I talk about Brian De Palma films, we see that he's got a very elevated style and technique influenced by a lot of European filmmakers. Do
Mm-hmm.
you have any recollection of your initial exposure to De Palma or how he was perceived in your area?
Well, the first time I ever watched the De Palma movie was Carrie. So
Oh,
that's one of the
wow.
reasons I picked this one.
Oh,
Because,
nice.
and from what I remember, I mean, I was 3 years old at the time. So I saw the movie a few years later, obviously.
Okay.
He was revered, highly revered for his type of cinematography, because that's really what sets him apart from most other directors, is that he's much more a director who images a film, who creates an entire concept.
Absolutely.
And from the people who do that, I mean, I would call Ridley Scott, I call him another one. He's the closest you can come to Kubrick without being Kubrick.
Yeah.
You can tell he's meticulous about everything.
Yes. And it's very funny because Kubrick is a filmmaker that I've always respected, I've always admired. But since I've made the jump into 4K, I've been getting all of the Kubrick films on
Hmm.
4K.
Hmm.
And what an amazing experience that has been to watch the Kubrick films in 4K.
Yeah, they're endlessly rewatchable just from the visuals you get.
Yeah.
And De Palma's the same way.
Oh, exactly. But I think you can also use those two filmmakers in the same breath when you talk about their sense of humors, because I think a lot of people see Kubrick as this very sort of stuffy filmmaker. But if you watch his movies, he had a wicked sense of humor, and De Palma does as well. And you see it in Carrie, and we're not really going to talk about any of the funny scenes in Carrie.
No, but there's a vicious sense of humor in it.
Hmm.
And I mean, Carrie influenced every horror movie that came after it, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. Friday the 13th just flat out stole the ending of
They
Carrie.
stole everything. Yeah, they stole everything. But that's fine, because they stole from the master.
Yeah. So that's wild that this was your first De Palma film. That is awesome. So for those that don't know, Carrie is sort of a high school uh, set novel about a young girl who's super different, and it deals with high school bullying at the same time as she's learning she has telekinetic powers.
Yes. And I was watching this, and you know what I was thinking?
Hmm.
He's a school shooter.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. But
It's basically kind of a Bowling for Columbine kind of thing.
yeah,
I
but
mean, she's
it's
bullied
yeah,
everywhere because her
yeah.
mother is insane, right? She's a religious zealot.
Piper Laurie, who was nominated for an Academy Award along with Sissy Spacek, who played Carrie. They were both nominated.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I love Carrie so much, because those performances stand up
Hmm.
and they stand out, and they still do. That's
Yeah,
why it's an inevitable classic, not
yeah.
just because everybody in it became huge. I mean, you can just rattle off the names of the people in it who were completely unknown because they came cheap. Because that movie cost 1.6 million.
Yeah,
That's another mind-blowing thing.
yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Siko, because famously, when they were casting this movie, De Palma was buddies with George Lucas. You know, they were
Yeah,
both up and coming
yeah.
filmmakers.
They
Uh,
cast those
and
movie at the same time.
and Lucas was casting Star Wars, and De
De
Palma said,
Palma
"Hey,
got the
listen,
Star Wars leftovers.
yeah," he said, "since we're both casting, people in the same age range, why don't we just like share the audition process. So, like
Yeah.
William Catt, who ended up playing Tommy, he auditioned for Star Wars.
Yeah, they could have switched over and we could have gotten Mark Hamill for this movie.
Yeah, Amy Irving, from what
Could
I
have been
understand,
Princess Leia.
almost got Princess Leia.
Arguably should have.
Yeah, and I gotta say this, John Travolta. Say what you want about Grease, but had John Travolta not gotten involved with De Palma and made Carrie, of course he made Blowout after it, we would
Yeah,
not have
because of
gotten,
this.
yeah, we would not have gotten John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, and he
Nope.
wouldn't have had the entire second act that he had.
Nope.
It's pretty remarkable. And if you think of like other actors that De Palma did that with, he was the first one to professionally work with, Robert De Niro.
Yep.
It's just remarkable when you look at the eye for talent that De Palma had as well.
Yeah. Another actor director,
Yeah.
right? He's just good at directing good talent and finding it.
Yeah. And of course, some of the other people in this movie, we already mentioned Amy Irving, Nancy Allen, the beautiful Nancy Allen, who is wonderfully wicked in this movie.
Yes, and when you're a kid, you look at her differently,
Yeah.
right? Because then she's just a meanie and she's just annoying and an airhead and vindictive and anything, you'd expect from a self-centered, narcissistic, what's she, 18 years old or something? This is like your senior prom.
Yeah.
You
17,
graduated
18 years
18, right?
old. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
graduated 16, so it's a very different kind of
Depending on when your
sensibility.
birthday is. Yeah.
True. But basically, when I watch her now, I'm like, oh my, she's insane. She's so insanely beautiful.
Yeah.
And she's so much more athletic than the rest of them because
Yeah.
they have like this scene where they
Oh, they're doing the
are
jumping jacks.
punished
Yeah.
during gym and they
Yeah.
have to do calisthenics. And she just does them with ease
Yeah.
and she has to act like she hates it. Right.
Yeah.
And all the other ones just can't keep up with her. It's hilarious to watch.
Yeah. And she would, of course, work with De Palma multiple times. They were married
Mhm.
for a period. Just a tremendous actress. And it's funny, my first exposure that I remember to Nancy Allen was as Lewis in RoboCop.
Yeah, mine too. Well,
Another.
not really Carrie, but I wasn't really, I never made the connection
Well,
until
you can't
later.
because in RoboCop she looks so different. She's
So
got that
different.
butch haircut.
Yeah.
The performances are about as far apart as you can get.
Yeah, showing how talented she is because
Yeah,
you never make the actual connection. You just see the character.
yeah, and this does give us a chance to mention a mutual other favorite director we have, Paul Verhoeven,
Oh yeah,
who I would lump in with Kubrick and De Palma as having a wicked satire streak
absolutely. Yeah,
and also a wicked sense of humor.
same kind of madness.
Exactly. Madness is the perfect word for it, Sicco. And I do want to talk a little bit, since we're going to be focusing on such a specific, we're going to be talking about a sequence within a scene, which I'm really, really excited about because
Mhm.
I want to thank you for suggesting this movie because it allowed me to watch Carrie twice in a month. Because I watched this probably a month ago, and that's when I was
Mhm.
starting to put together the idea to do this podcast.
Mhm.
And then when you suggested we watch Carrie, I'm like, well, obviously I have
Oh
to
yeah.
watch Carrie again now because I
Yep.
need to be able to talk about it. So thank
Yeah,
you for
because you
that.
have to get it out of your head that this is a simplistic horror movie. It isn't.
Exactly.
It isn't
Exactly.
at all.
Yeah. But the one thing I do want to mention while we're talking about it is you sort of mentioned the European influences in his direction. I do
Mhm.
want to say that De Palma he made a lot of films that went down this lane, but
Yeah.
he's like Hitchcock if Hitchcock was able to make films without being censored.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like if Hitchcock was in Italy.
Yeah,
If he
exactly.
had based himself in Italy, he could have made the movies De Palma basically made.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's no slight on either one. I mean, it's not
definitely
discounting
not.
what De Palma
They were a
did.
product of their time, really.
Yeah, but the one thing I always look at, especially if you think about like the opening helicopter, it's not a helicopter shot. It would be a
Mhm.
helicopter shot in Psycho.
Yeah,
Like Hitchcock had these big ideas and technology just wasn't there yet.
yeah. And you can sort of tell so does De Palma because
Exactly.
I mean the special effects don't really stand up. You can see the miniature work and you can see the low budget. It's really the performances that make this movie what it is. And in that way, it sort of resembles a Hitchcock film because that's the same way. You just sort of cringe through the special effects and you watch the performances and what these people bring to bear. And that's really what you see in this movie. It's you see a bunch of kids just going for it
Absolutely.
because it is obvious they got a lot of leeway with stuff.
Yeah. And that's again, trusting your actors.
Yeah, and you can tell what a big star John Travolta was, just how much charisma came off the screen. I mean, he plays a heavy, he plays a dumb galoot, but there's a lot of extra in there.
Oh yeah, and we're
Yeah.
not talking about the scene, but one scene that I was watching it with my jaw on the floor because I can't imagine the scene as filmed by anybody else being the same. But it's when
Mhm.
he's in the car with Nancy Allen and she's putting her
Right.
makeup on, and they get in that fight, and she keeps calling him a dumb shit, and he
Hmm.
ultimately smacks her.
Yeah.
Just that back and forth and that bickering and how intense it gets, and then when he
Hmm.
slaps her and how quickly the slap happens, it's another moment where you're just like, that's any other director with this script would not have done what they did the way De Palma did it, and that's why I
Hmm.
want to get to this sequence now. So we're going to jump to
Yes.
the towards the about 50 minutes, 50 or 55 minutes into the movie. We're at the
Hmm.
prom,
Hmm.
and it's the moment when we see that the ballot box is being stuffed. So it's basically PJ Souls
Yeah.
picking up all the votes, switching them out, and bringing them up to get counted. At this point, Amy Irving's character sneaks in, and we
Hmm.
get this miraculous. This is all one take. It took me
Yeah.
the third time of watching the
To
movie
see it,
to see that it was all one take.
it's one crane shot
Yes.
because there's tremendous depth in the scene.
Yeah. So it starts with PJ Souls picking up Tommy and Carrie's ballot.
Hmm.
And then it ends with the reveal of them winning King and Queen of the Prom.
Yeah, imagine what it took mentally to block that scene. It's 3D level
Yeah,
chess.
I talked to this. I talked about this in our Snake Eyes episode, which is that extended long,
Hmm.
three shots that were made into one shot, Nick Cage sequence.
Right.
But again, another thing I love about De Palma is he visualized this shot and he did it.
Yeah.
And basically, De Palma's like when he gets an idea in his head, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. He really literally films what he can visualize.
Yeah, and they have to figure out how to do it. And this one, like you said, it's a crane shot. So
Yeah. He actually, I saw a documentary on it, and he had to fight the studio to get the crane,
yeah,
and they didn't understand it. And he was like, "Well, I'm the director." And it wasn't a high school. That place didn't have a roof. They
okay.
just hung up stars to give the illusion of a roof.
Oh wow.
It's a 360 degrees set,
Hmm.
and they had assistants rip out chairs and tables and move people while they were doing the shot.
Excellent.
Just think
Yeah,
about the I mean the trust in the organization
yeah.
and
Well,
De
no, and
Palma.
everybody has to hit their mark as well. It's not
Yeah,
just the technical thing behind it. It's like if an actor or a performer in front of the camera fucks up,
yeah.
your take shot.
Cut,
You might as well just start
repeat.
over.
Yeah, and that's De Palma, right?
Yeah.
He's a 30 take director. He's I mean, and that's the 70s when you think about it. Lucas was the same way. I mean, there's the famous Death Star hallway shot. They shot like what 50 times or
Hmm.
something,
Yeah.
where and they didn't end up in the movie.
But the one thing I will say about this, Seiko, is all of the quote unquote gimmicky shots that De Palma does,
Mhm.
they're the best way to tell the story the way he needs to tell it.
Yeah,
Again, to see this flow of events from the, picking up of the ballot,
yeah.
tracking up past Amy
Tells
Irving. Yeah.
with one shot, he
Hmm.
tells the story,
Hmm.
the basic premise of the most pivotal point in the movie.
Yeah.
This is if they hadn't done this, nobody would have died. Maybe
Yeah.
the mother,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because she was already plotting the death of her daughter,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
But basically, the two of them might have died because obviously, spoilers about a 50-year-old movie. Her mother attempts to kill her, and in the end, she kills her mother, and then she brings her into a closet where she's been, basically maligned all her life. She pushed in the
Yeah.
closet to pray, and then she basically kills herself by destroying the house around her, and she dies
Yes.
and they die in the fire.
Yes.
right? But if that rope thing, if they hadn't done that stupid stuff with the bucket,
Hmm.
if those kids hadn't been so mean, and I mean, it's kind of presented as, well, they're just fun-loving kids, and they didn't really mean it, right? It's just this 18-year-old self-centered, narcissistic. You can't do this to me. You can't make me get the tension. I'm
Hmm.
gonna avenge myself. Well, they picked the wrong girl for that, didn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we know, as a viewer, we know. So we know when we see them at the bottom of that days where they're going to be getting an award, when we see Nancy Allen and John Travolta hiding behind it, you're like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? And then you see the rope, and the
Yep.
rope goes up. And where does the rope go? It goes up and it goes up. And Amy Irving notices it. What's that rope for? And she
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Uh-huh.
notices, follows it, and they follow it and they follow it. And then you see the bucket. It's, oh, that's why they were killing the pigs. And you have this bucket up there. And it's like, what's this bucket going to do? Well, her moment of glory is going to be her moment of supreme embarrassment. Oh, haha.
Yeah.
And you see this strand of creeper dropping. And Amy Irving notices it, and that launches it because she runs straight to the teacher.
Yeah. And the one thing that I wanted to sort of make sure I talked about Hitchcock with is this
Hmm.
is one of Hitchcock's golden rules
Yes.
is
Build
Hitchcock was
suspense.
always suspense, not surprise,
Hmm.
where as an audience member, we know something that's going to happen that the character doesn't.
The strand of creeper foreshadows what's about to happen.
Yes. And I got to tell you that I'll take suspense over surprise every day of the week, twice on
Yep.
Sunday. It's incredibly effective. And the other thing I want to say overall about this
Yeah,
movie
the shark
is,
scare is a cop out, really.
mhm.
It's kind
No,
of
I mean,
what Stephen King always said. It's like, okay, first I'll try suspense, um, and then I'll try to shock you, and if that doesn't work, I'll go for the gross out. That's
yeah,
basically how he wrote.
no, and I mean, there's a time and a place for all of it. I mean, a Friday the 13th movie, a slasher film, isn't going to really work too well with suspense, but
No.
you need surprise. But I will say this as well, Siko. This movie, it's nowhere near De Palma's goriest. For a horror
Nope.
film, it's not as goriest. He's made much gorier films that were not horror
Mm.
films. But at the same time, the main takeaway from this movie that I got was, aside from being like an incredibly sad movie, I mean, Sissy Spacek's performance is
Oh,
incredible as
yeah.
this girl that, she gets
Yeah,
home
you
and
feel
she,
her pain.
yeah, she just wants her mom to hug her. I mean, that if that doesn't like just crush you, I don't know what will. And even after her mother's dead, she
Hmm.
still wants to embrace her. But I mean, this movie, it's truly terrifying.
Well, basically, Sissy Spacek just gives off the vibe with her eyes,
Hmm.
and especially how De Palma shoots those eyes.
Yeah.
That's what makes the horror, because she did, and that visual of her being completely covered in blood.
Yeah.
And of course, that's symbolic, because the whole thing starts with blood, because it's
Yes.
about a girl coming into her telekinetic powers because she starts
Just
to
hit puberty.
menstruate.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the idea King had. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of a preternatural kind of thing,
Yeah.
that a woman who comes of age reaches these powers, and that's
Hmm.
another symbolic thing, because that's the point where she stops being a child and starts getting receiving power over men,
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah.
Right, that's the idea. And everything is a motif. Everything in this film is a motif, and most of it is religious, deeply, deeply religious.
Hmm.
Everything, even the
Yeah.
scene we were describing, everything is completely engineered to make a commentary about organized religion.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure we'll talk about this scene at some point, if not with you, maybe with somebody else. But the final scene between Carrie and her mother
Hmm.
in the book, according to De Palma,
Hmm.
she just has a heart attack and dies.
Yeah, not in this one though.
Yeah. De Palma said, "Wait a minute, what? She has a heart attack?"
Yeah, Carrie, well, heart attack. No, Carrie slowly stops her heart with telekinetic powers. But in a book, it works.
Yeah, yeah. But again, this is the visual storyteller that is De Palma putting two and two together and saying we're making this deeply religious sort of
Mm.
film. How can you
Well,
not
if
do
this
a
was a House
crucifixion?
episode, they would just show it, right?
Yeah.
But of course, in the 70s, De Palma didn't have that kind of visual option. So
Mhm.
it's like, well, what's best? Well, we just shoot her through with knives, just like the doll in the closet.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a doll in the closet, and that is made to represent, I think, Saint Christopher, who is like run through with arrows.
Hmm.
And she was always made to pray. And then in the end, when she murders her mother, the mother is in the exact same pose as the patron saint. It's very symbolic.
Yeah, and one other point I did want to note, and God, we're talking about a bunch of different scenes here, but I do want to make sure that we focus on the sequence that we were. But
Yes.
after the pig blood,
Hmm.
we get the split screen where she looks up and the lights are red, and then the whole scene becomes red.
Right. This is one of De Palma's famous red movies.
Yes, probably only outdone by Dario Argento in terms of his use of red.
Right.
But again, Carrie, up until about 45 minutes ago,
Hmm.
wasn't incredibly high on my list of De Palma films if I was going
Yeah.
to rank them. And it's probably close to being in my top 10 right now.
Yes, and it's also so important to De Palma himself because this was his first real commercial success. We probably wouldn't have had gotten De Palma after the 70s if this one had bombed.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that is he did his the movie he did after this was called The Fury with Kirk Douglas,
Right.
which also deals with telekinesis.
Hmm.
And there's a wonderful documentary, I know we've talked about it offline and you haven't seen it yet, called De Palma, where it's
Right. I
just
still have to see
basically
that.
De Palma sitting down like you are right now and just talking through each one of his films. And he
Right.
basically says that The Fury was the only thing he could get. So you're incredibly correct when you say that had Carrie not done what it did, because of course it became sort of a runaway hit and also got
Yeah.
nominated for 2 Oscars. But
Hmm.
in the immediate aftermath of it, he was scrambling to find a project to do.
Yeah.
And then again, I think after, Carrie did what it did, he was sort of given a little bit more of an opportunity to sort of pick and choose his projects.
Yes. Well, it is when you think about it, it is really a showcase of the ultimate talent that he has because he had a budget made of nothing. He had 1.6 million. What
Hmm.
is that?
Hmm.
So, and I mean, that's why he doesn't blow up the village. He just blows up the high school gym, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, his superior filmmaking gets him through it all. Anyone else with 1.6 million would have delivered a third.
Yeah, but
Not so De Palma.
the other thing I want to stress, and I've tried to stress this in every episode we've done so far, is that, and I said it already in this episode, is that when De Palma does a shot that other filmmakers will do, and I'll
Hmm.
bring Michael Bay to mind. And
Sure.
I enjoy Michael Bay. I like his films. I think when I want to, eat some popcorn and put my brain on the, on the couch next to me,
Yeah.
I can watch a Michael Bay film. But when you see one of his like, patented bad boy shots where he's revolving around somebody,
Sure.
you're made acutely aware of what he's doing. Whereas anytime De Palma is doing a gimmicky shot or a shot that's very complex or very artistic,
Hmm.
there's a very particular reason behind it. It's serving the story, but it's also showcasing his technique and his mastery of the art. And I
Hmm.
think that's one thing that De Palma doesn't get enough credit for because a lot of filmmakers that are known for their cinematography or their use of the camera
Hmm.
get highlighted a lot more or get considered as very sort of stylistic directors.
Well, it's kind of haunted him to a certain extent because
Yes.
people think of his films as too artsy.
But that's the other thing I wanted to get to because I mentioned it in our Snake Eyes episode is De Palma sort of makes artistic films for gutter viewers.
Right. He's Mozart when you think about it.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of filmmakers I think they operate at a level above a lot of the common moviegoers' heads, but I think that at his heart De Palma is really making popcorn films.
Yes, and he does it to great effect. That's the
Hmm.
difference. It's not art for art's sake. He uses technique to elevate the scene.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it doesn't seem self-serving. It all is
No,
in service of the story. But if you haven't watched Carrie, it's I don't know where you watched it, where you are, but here in the States, it's on HBO Max or just Max right now. It's available there. So if you have
I own it. So
okay. But for listeners who don't have the DVD on their shelf, or their Blu-ray or the new 4K,
mm.
it is on Max here. So if you have a Max subscription, you can either watch it there or sign up for the free trial and watch it. But I encourage you to watch this movie, but also pay attention to this shot because
Yeah.
it took me the third time I was watching the scene
Mhm.
before I had to rewind it. And I paused the movie and I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is one long shot, which isn't even the thing that really blew me away about this when you suggested we do the sequence. I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, it climbs up and then it goes through the pillar to reveal Tommy and Carrie. But then I was like, wait, there's a whole other half. And then I was like, son of a bitch, Sicco knew what he was doing when he
I
picked
know
this
what I was doing.
sequence.
Because the one of the reasons why the scene is so important is because what comes next is all short cuts. It's all cut, 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 cut,
Hmm.
cut, cut. And I've heard De Palma say that you can get away with something like that because cutting is considered, ugly,
Hmm.
but you can get away with something like that if you don't cut before it, because that
Yeah.
makes the cutting more effective.
It's like taking a
It
deep
basically
breath.
speeds up the film.
Yeah.
And having one long pivotal scene like this, like you said, not just building tension, but it kind of stretches out time. And then when you start cutting, it's like building power in an engine and then releasing it. And because the final act of the film is again a very small, very harshly blocked scene, right? The death of the mother, the confrontation with the mother. I mean, it's back in the house and it's dark overtones with all those candles, and this scene perfectly connects everything that came before it and everything that comes after. It's
Yeah.
brilliant,
Yeah.
and it's like I can watch this scene again and again and again and again and think about like, okay, how did he come up with this? Because in any other movie, it would have just been a pan shot and that's it.
Yep. No, absolutely. It would have been a
Cut, cut,
throwaway.
cut. Go
Yeah.
basically back to the portrait shots because
Yep.
they're pretty young people. He doesn't do that. He shows them from really odd angles as well.
Yeah, no, I mean it's one of my favorite aspects of De Palma is just that he's going to find the most interesting way to
Yes,
shoot a
because he
scene.
sets another thing that this scene does. It sets up the motivation for Nancy Allen to do all this.
Hmm.
It's a sex thing for her.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Because she
especially when you see
actually,
her
I
licking
mean,
her
she
lips
looks like
and
she orgasms when
yeah,
she releases the rope
uh-huh,
railer. And that's why he's showing the rope.
yeah.
Because that rope is basically Nancy Allen having sex.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well,
It's
Siko,
symbolic.
yeah, I know we could probably, you know what? At some point, maybe I'll start doing long form episodes on movies, and we can talk about Carrie.
And we can talk
And
about it for hours and
yeah,
hours.
yeah. But yeah, again, this sequence, the pig blood bucket reveal is a
Hmm.
masterful sequence in a masterful movie, possibly De Palma's first masterpiece of many. But Seiko, I want to thank you for sitting down and picking this movie and picking this sequence. I enjoyed watching the movie immensely, and I really enjoyed talking through it with you. Before we go, though, I know we're both on the Last of the Action Heroes Network
Yes,
podcast
we are.
together. Do
Technically,
you,
I still am.
yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about what's on the
Sure.
podcasting horizon or where people can find?
Oh, there are big things coming.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been working for almost a year now to bring my podcast, the Mel Gibson podcast, Hugging the Cactus, to bring it to YouTube, and we're almost there.
Oh,
So, yeah, I've because I'm taking it from radio to television. It's going to
excellent.
be a visual
Um,
entity now.
yeah, and we've done two episodes of that show together, right?
Yes, we have.
Yeah. So I'll be sure to link where you can find that on the network. And Seiko, I'm sure we'll hopefully talk again for this De Palma show because I know we're both big fans.
Definitely.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for having me on.